I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome you all to the workshop meeting of the Exeter Township Board of Directors. We have a two-portion agenda this evening. We're currently in a special voting meeting. Subsequent to the issues there, we will adjourn that meeting and proceed on with the workshop. Does anyone desire to be heard? I have Linda Pope.
Linda Pope, 50 Glenwood Drive. I'm very disorganized. I had a newspaper article in my car with me that I was going to give figures, and my car's in the shop, so I don't have the paper, so I don't know what the figures are. But it was an article that was talking about the increase in taxes and the increase in the budget. And one of the things that was mentioned was, you know, the biggest items are personnel costs, one, and they also mentioned educational increases because of two particular items. One was new math books, I believe, and the other one was individual laptops or something like that? One-to-one, is that what it's called, one-to-one laptops? Okay. And together, those two items, the math books and the one-to-one laptops, cost like $900,000, which may seem really a lot of money. That's a big chunk of the budget. And I don't know how much the math books cost, but I'm sure they don't cost, you know, it's not like even, you know, the laptops are probably very expensive and the math books are probably a lot less expensive. I don't really know, maybe not. But I would like to know that. I would like to know how much these laptops cost, how many students, does that mean that you buy the laptops and give them to the kids? Do they rent? How does that work and who gets them? You know, how many people get them? Are they for their thing they take them home? Is it for their personal use? Do they just get to use them in a classroom? I'd really like to know more about that because it seems like a big expense.
Well, the board is aware of this because they've been to all the meetings. But yes, a laptop is assigned to a child who carries it with them from 9th to graduation.
Every ninth grade kid gets a laptop?
Yes, but the program's going to be instituted over a period of 4 years, Linda. I think Mr. Ways in the back, he can probably explain how the system works the best. But from what we understand is that right now, the number of computers we have in the school between our carts, our computer labs, et cetera, we're covering about half the students. Maybe even more than that, I'm getting the head shake yes in the back. So when we have different homework assignments, research, things of that nature, where we ask the students to work on things, we want them to be able to use the same software so they can interact possibly online at night with their teacher, you know, as far as submitting things, as far as putting papers together, making sure they're using the same software as far as a WordPerfect or Word, Microsoft Word, so that everything is going to be fluid that way. And this way we can standardize it. Plus, we're already at that point where we're using the computers in the classroom for educational purposes. So instead of having to make sure the part's there, which it may not get there because another teacher already took it, we can make sure the students have it in there in case the teacher says, okay, we want you to do a Google search on President Lincoln because it's Lincoln's birthday or something like that. So everyone's going to be able to tune in and get there at that point. So that's the concept.
I think another part of the program, Linda, and I'll let Dr. Davies address this, but really by instituting a one-to-one laptop program, it's really sort of the foundation for also the science, technology, engineering, and math program that is also starting in the district. And you really can't pursue that STEM program without this technological foundation. Maybe you can touch on that a little bit more, Dr. Davies.
Well, just one thing. It's $135,000 for the laptops. That's the proposal, and it's showing for the new math curriculum textbook $290. So I don't know where the 900,000.
Yeah,
Again, I don't know, just giving you the number, and it's in the presentation for
all right,
tonight. Okay?
I'll find it tomorrow and I'll.
No, but I mean, it's in the handout.
Okay. All right, well, that's good to know. I wanted to break down that.
Were your questions answered regarding the one-to-one initiative, ma'am?
Yeah, pretty much. I guess I still think it's a big expense and maybe the students could contribute something towards that.
Linda, I'll offer another perspective. You asked about the laptops versus the math program.
Mhm.
The math program will last many years,
Mhm.
as textbooks do.
Right.
The laptops are actually not only $135,000 this year, but an ongoing commitment to buy laptops for ninth graders for foreseeable future each year.
Right. Well, I was thinking that the books wouldn't really, in the end, the books aren't gonna cost as much as the laptops because the books are less.
So I'm going to be voting against a one-to-one laptops because I don't feel it's an efficient use of our money.
Thank you. Okay. All right. And that might be something, because if everybody else, it's still might pass, you might consider having the students contribute something, They have to contribute to extracurricular things. Why not contribute to the laptop? These kids, most of them have computers, iPhones, everybody's walking around with an iPhone and they're texting. Yeah, they can afford to have their little toys. Couldn't they afford to contribute to this expense? That's all. Thank you.
I'd like to announce that we did meet in executive session to discuss personnel prior to the meeting. And cover the budget.
Last Monday, we had a business function committee meeting and we reviewed the budget. And I'm going to go through the same presentation this evening. Although we had good news yesterday, late yesterday afternoon, the increase in healthcare is at 3%. So I adjusted the numbers by the expense for next year, healthcare district share down by 220,000, and that's reflected in these numbers.
You can thank St. Joe's for that, by the way. Which St. Joe's?
Divine intervention.
Mary had
Yeah. Current year deficit, 430,000. That's down from our original budget of 1.8 million. What I've adjusted, revenue, Medicaid, access funds, we are not going to get what I originally budgeted, 112,000. There's a lag in claims processing. There's a third-party liability issue. There have been a reduction in reimbursement, and that will flow into that reduction into next year as well. And this just shows you that sitting in our account of PDE is only 38,000, where in prior years we were receiving about $250,000 annually. This just reflects the expense change, which zero net impact. I am increasing charter school enrollment tuition cost for this year by 72,000, and the money that was in reserve, budget reserve, covers those things. Basically, what we've seen, I reduced the numbers back in February. The original budget was 1.5 million. I had reduced it, to 1.2, and I'm increasing it a little bit more because we are trending at 117 students in charter, cyber charter, a couple in the brick and mortar. But I had reduced my original estimate based upon 110. But the trend is at 117. Next year, at this point, it's a $2.2 million deficit with no tax increase. And as I said, the number that I reduced was the expenditure number. We're looking at, and the resolution tonight, $68,807,600. Again, this just shows the sources of revenue. local, state, federal. Largest increase in state is due to the state's reimbursement for employer retirement contributions. The Ready to Learn grant is in there. It's an additional $563,000 for next year. And we have some additional debt reimbursement. Those are the drivers there. Without any tax increase, our local revenue increases $83,000.
And are you sure that we're going to be getting that money from the state, or is it dependent on,
I'm not sure, and with the news of the increase in the state's deficit, between now and our meeting in June, we have to evaluate that uncertainty and whether we need to pull out some of those funds. But I am really concerned that, there have been some articles recently, which I'm sure you've seen.
yes?
Proceed with caution. Again, next year I reduced the Medicaid access funds. Title I, we received the allocation of $63,000 more. So that's the changes in revenue. Expenditures, again, here's where I reflected the $220,000 reduction in employee benefits since the last business function committee meeting. Overall, we have a $3.2 million increase from our current year to next year. And again, you see where the largest increase, one of the larger increases, dollar-wise, is in employee benefits. And that has to do with the increase in the employer's contribution rate to 21.4%. This just walks you through the changes since the meeting we had in April to where we are currently, a reduction of $80,000. Again, the largest reduction is in the healthcare premium increase at a rate of 3% versus we had 6.62%. I've also adjusted here again the charter school tuition for next year based upon the trend. We worked with special education to look at the tuition costs related to extended school year. We've made some adjustment there as well. Special education supplies, software, we had to make adjustments. We included some additional supply money for Title I. We're receiving additional money. The tentative plan is to use some of that money for supply. Again, down in equipment, we reduced the laptop one-to-one cost based upon the direction as far as the type of machine that they will be going with. Again, the drivers in the budget, the pension obligation, contract wage increases, healthcare premium, debt service, math curriculum, $290,000. Project Lead the Way, the STEM program, $106,000. IU contracted services are increasing, and the laptop one-to-one, $135,000.
And I apologize I forgot to ask you this before, but I know it's not a huge amount,
And I
but
forgot to adjust this.
is the $20,000 that the foundation has given towards the STEM program, is that reflected anywhere in?
It's reflected in
The
revenue.
revenue, is it in the revenue? Okay.
As a donation.
Okay.
In the IU contracted services, is that typical, or is that an anomaly number?
It fluctuates from year to year. It depends upon the students that are placed in the IU's PAL program. I know Ronnie's in the audience. There are a number of students that are in our senior high school this year, but they are going into the IU's program. So I believe it's 4 or 5 of them that we're budgeting for those costs, and it's service provided by the IU.
So why are they going to the IU rather than doing service here?
Well, it's the PAL program, Ronnie Yeah, would you be able to address the increase in the number of students placed for next year in the
In the AED, right, in the archive.
PAL program?
In the PAL program?
Or is it Project Search, whichever one?
Articulately, at this moment, off the top of my head, with the number of students, I don't exactly remember the number of students, but we have had students this year that were projected to attend the PAL program, and they have dropped out of that. So those funds were not used this year completely for those students. But for next year, I want to say we have 3 on the list, but I would have to go back and double check my actual list.
So Dr. Miller has, that's the plan, and that's the recommendation of the teacher at the high school, that these students need to be part of that program. And their needs will be met there. So that's part of that.
It might help if you explain what the PAL program is.
Adult preparation for adult life.
You have life skills or something like that?
Can you,
These are life skills students.
Ronnie, can you talk a little bit about the
Yes,
PAL
I can.
program?
These
Thanks.
are, the PAL program is a program that helps the students by providing them, when I say the functional life skills, I mean the skills in being able to develop the social skills, how do they interact with others, how do they prepare for a job, basic job that they would be able to do, and then the students get a chance to practice that. They also get a chance to practice their living skills in terms of how do they budget, how do they cash check, how do they go ahead and begin to spend their money wisely. And it also helps them have those small skills that they need for their job skills to be able to move forward into the community. So it is not the same thing as the students going to, for example, for the students that are going to a tech program from high school, but it does provide the students jobs, experiences that they can work with at their level.
And we can do that here?
Well, we would need a lot more staff. We would need a lot more community experience and resources that we don't readily have with us at this moment. We also don't have the physical space to be able to do that.
They actually
We
have a
require a
house.
lot of planning.
They have a house where these children are taken in and they run the household. They go out, they buy groceries, and there's a staff member with them, escorting them and showing them the steps. Quite frankly, these children would probably have been institutionalized 30 years ago.
We have
They are-
developed
they get a hand, they take them by the hand and they guide them through this. It's quite labor intensive, it's equipment intensive, it's facility intensive.
They teach them how to ride the bus, how to make a transfer. I mean, they really do go out.
We have at the high school one room set aside, like a mini apartment, so they can be able to go up and they can learn how to make beds, they can learn how to do the requirements that are part of their independent living. That's a very small portion of what is actually available through the PAL program and actually the support that they need.
And besides that service from the IU, if you recall, there were the support for the hearing impaired students, that has increased significantly because of the couple students that have moved in to this district.
And before you leave that, the healthcare premium, the explanation on the right side says based on 6.62%.
That should say 3%.
Okay, so that, so
yeah, I
the
forgot to
numbers,
change that.
the numbers,
Yes, I was, scrambling around today.
sure, thanks.
And since there's a break in the action, you might as well go now. I was looking at just sheet 10, or slide 10. I was trying to get, I'm looking at item 800 versus 200. I'm wondering, could you just define what dues, interest, and claims are that?
Well, the majority of that would be the interest that's paid on the general obligation bonds. That's the majority of that. And then were you asking about the 900 as well?
No, I just wondered why it increased by almost 1.4 million over year to year.
It depends upon the scheduled payments, whether it's interest or principal. In total, there is an increase of about 200,000, but overall, it's around 9 million between principal and interest. Consistent. So at this point in time, with the reduction in expense, the deficit is 1,777,000. Commitments, assignments, the unassigned fund balance. We cannot have an unassigned fund balance that's more than 8% of our expenditures. That is the final adopted budget we have to be within that threshold, or it could be lower. So the maximum that based upon all of these commitments, assignments, and what our assumptions are as far as revenue and expense, could not be more than a 1.14% increase. And that would be the unassigned fund balance at 7.9%. These are the other scenarios that we previously discussed, index at 2.7%, but again, our unassigned fund balance would approach 10%. And we cannot adopt a budget at that threshold.
And I see you still have the budget reserve for healthcare.
Oh,
You still maintain it at 8%.
I forgot to take this 15,000 as well. Yeah, here again, I forgot to.
Well, but again, too,
Well,
that's an assignment.
If we look at, it's an assignment, but we talked last week, well, here's just 3%, but look at if it was just a 7.5%. And I believe, Betty, we're trending 2% less than national averages, and that's about 9. It's still coming out to approaching, well, it's 500,000. It's going to keep growing, which is why I went back to, we discussed this. I didn't change that to 7.5.
And again, the question, if some of those were either reduced or removed, that would increase or lower the maximum percentage up top, correct?
Right. It would increase, if you reduce any of these, it will increase your unassigned fund balance, and it would reduce what you could increase your taxes by. And this is just collapsing all of that detail so that you can see it better, and also providing you with capital project funds and the Owatton Creek balance, which will be used toward the finishing of the site work and food service. This slide illustrates the challenge of having to live within the Act 1 index. And what that Act 1 index would generate this year, 2.7% or 1.1 million. And assumptions is around 3% based upon what the Independent Fiscal Office is projecting, how much it would generate per year if you would raise to the index, but the increase in the pension costs, and then the increase in all of our major items, wages, health care. So it's very difficult to live within the Act 1 index if you continue to increase your costs.
And with that food budget, is that 863,000, is that coming out of the general fund, or?
That's their projected fund balance for June 30, 2015. And I'll show you a slide at the end.
I know last year, they had a deficit that we had to cover. Now, is that?
That they covered with reserves. It's a separate fund. And this year, there is a deficit projected in next year. So this is what would be remaining at the end of June 2015.
But, I mean, so it's not coming out of taxation for this year, it's coming out of their reserves.
Right, it's a proprietary fund for business, and it's a separate fund. We had a discussion about the increase in special education costs and whether there should be an assignment for this type of increase. And this slide illustrates special education costs are going up by 8% based upon the projection for 2014-15. Our funding, at this point, there is no increase reflected in the budget. The formula for the distribution of additional special education funds, that has not been approved yet. We might look to see 60-some thousand, but that has not been clearly defined. Our special education population, including those with the gifted, is about 26% of our student enrollment. So that's a cost that continues to grow. We did not take the exception from last year, 700-some thousand. So because of the trend in the increased costs for the needs of these students, that's why there is an assignment. That's my logic. The Ready to Learn grant, it's an additional $563,000. The accountability block grant is rolled into that, so we currently have $180,000. Our allocation is $563,000 more. If that were not to be included, that would increase the deficit to $2.3 million, and the unassigned fund balance would be 7.1%, assuming this increase. And obviously, if no increase, $2.2 million deficit.
So do we know that before we vote on the final budget?
We're not
We may
sure.
not know that.
We may not.
No.
We may have a better indication than we do today. We may not know for certain, but we could very well have better information between now and then.
Yeah, reading an article, this was in the Tribe Live, Jim Buckheit, head of the Pennsylvania Association of School Administrators, his quote, "Given the news last week about the state deficit, they're very concerned if the money that the governor proposed will actually pass." So, like I said before, proceed with caution. So,
Do you know anything about that, Russ?
Yeah, every legislator I talk to says that everything, the revenue numbers are so dismal that everything is on the table, including education. Even though the spokespeople from the Department of Education says the governor has assured them that the education budget will not be touched. No one sees how that's going to happen.
The Ready to Learn grant, again, this the use of the funds, the STEM Project Lead the Way, $106,000. The coordinator, coach, the laptop, one-to-one consultation. You know, I want to emphasize we'll be making changes between now and June. We have been discussing modifying some things, but I just wanted to reflect the healthcare one. I didn't want to do too many piecemeal things, it just gets confusing. So we may be modifying some of our, conference consulting services. Again, the ABG grant for this year funded $180,000 of our full-day kindergarten. The balance of the funds we'll use toward full-day kindergarten. Full-day kindergarten, between wages and benefits, costs about $1.3 million. The millage impact, I added in the 31.146 mils, 1.14% increase. Average additional cost per household with an average assessment of $107,000, be $37.57 per year. Now, the budget has to be prepared on the state's form, the PDE 2028, and you all received a copy of that, and it's posted on the website. What's reflected in there is this scenario. Does not indicate that we're not adopting millage. That doesn't happen until June. But I have to use the model and to ensure that we're below that 8% threshold. So that's what's reflected in this handout that everyone received. I quickly want to review the capital project fund this year. We issued new money, $2.5 million, some interest, donation from Walk Like Burks. Insurance proceeds offsets the cost of the damage to the junior high roof. So $6.3 million approximately. Next year, we have projects about $130,000 which are moved in the capital project fund. This is outside of the general fund. So that is the proposed budget for capital projects. I don't have a Watton Creek in here. Those funds will be used toward the site work, which in June, there will probably be a special voting meeting on June 11th to award the bid. That's what was discussed. I want to confirm that date. And the site work is, right now it's being advertised and will be awarding bids on June 11th. This is the food service fund, proprietary fund, and for next year it's a deficit of $133,000. They do contribute $105,000 to the general fund for utilities and other costs that are paid by the general fund on their behalf. So there's the $863,000 remaining, but that will continue to be used up with the rising costs in wages, benefits, and food costs. The supervisor of food service, Gloria Clay, is recommending increases in food prices for 2014-15. They range anywhere from 2 to 4.5%, and really her logic is based upon not hindering participation, but also trying to cover the costs related to the increase in food prices and all of the requirements of the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act.
And do you have any idea of how many children pack their lunch, as compared to eat, here at in the cafeteria?
Meal participation is in February, and I think in your pile of papers there is a copy, is 52%. All right, so a little less than half do pack. And that'll vary from building to building. And that's the end of the presentation. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I'm just confused by something. Maybe you can help me out. I'm looking at both slide 13 and slide 19. Slide 19 is the Ready to Learn grant. Is that the amount that's put toward these, but not in total? Is that so? There's like if I look on slide 13, the cost of STEM is listed as 156,910.
And that is actually the after 14-15. These are for what will occur 15-16 through 17-18.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Dr. Tom.
Not so much a question as just a series of comments. Ann does a very good job of presenting all the data. There's a lot of moving pieces, as I've said in times past. One thing I would like the folks in the audience that are taxpayers and represent the taxpayers to understand that maybe the board has seen a couple times, and that is that you can't simply look at what is the projected deficit for, say, the general fund, the operating parts of it. You actually have to look at the fund balances as well, because I think that's an integral part of the conversation. My comment is that when you look at the numbers, I can't see how it could ever be supported by anyone here around this table to have a tax increase. I think it's even a push to keep taxes flat this upcoming year. And the reasons that I suggest that is that, one, we are running a significant unallocated general fund balance. We have cash reserves in places like the food service budget that approximates $1 million. We have capital expenditure fund balances that are over $6 million. We are stipulating that there is going to be, on page 13 of the presentation, that we are going to add some assignments, and I realize that Mr. Staub and others have commented on this, but that we're adding special education cost increase allotments, healthcare cost allotments. Those two alone, again, are in excess of $500,000 or $600,000. There's just a lot of money sloshing around. And I do not see how we can go to the taxpayers with a recommendation for a tax increase. The other thing I want to say is that in a lot of these unexpended fund balances, particularly the general fund, I'd rather see that money returned to the taxpayers. I think there's economic leverage by putting it into the taxpayers' hands. It's earning no money in our balance. I realize it provides a cushion to us, but I ask at what expense? And I would also say that either the capital expenditure funds that are not allocated and the general fund unallocated balances start to be used to pay down our sizable debt balances. And I think that would be a remarkably good use of funds. So I am not going to be voting for any tax hike. I would suggest that we at best keep it flat and that we consider a tax reduction.
So what would be an acceptable fund balance then?
An acceptable fund balance could be for the unassigned, we could actually cut that in half.
So you're advocating basically almost a $4 million give back to the taxpayers?
I'm saying that you could unassigned balance is $2 million, but I'm saying you could reasonably argue that with all the money that's spread in these different places, that an unassigned general fund balance of 3 or 4% would be enough of a cushion.
Now, the other day at the business function meeting, I believe that Bob Quinter said that we were on a trajectory to bankruptcy. So, and that nothing that you've seen tonight changes your opinion on that.
No.
So that, in effect, we'd be on a quicker trajectory to bankruptcy by reducing our fund balance.
I would agree with that.
We could raise, if we raise taxes close to 10% a year, which we obviously can't, that would not even, at the point where the pension, when the pension increase gets to 30 or 31%, that would not even be enough just to cover the pension increase. And again, I don't have the exact numbers right here, but just that in particular. So when the index gives you a certain, whether it be 1, 2, or 3% increase, all we're doing is we have whatever the accounts or where the money's sitting, it's just going to be going like this until it gets to the point where it will be all going. So, though I do agree that some of the assignments, I question some of the assignments or maybe adjusting some of the assignments, I would not allocate taking that money and throwing on debt, because I think it would be similar to someone with their household debt taking their savings and applying it to one portion of their debt, and then a few years later not being able to pay their bills. And that's really what it would be from just a debt and an income standpoint. So that would concern me. The assignments, that are a couple that I would question, possibly adjust, but I would not recommend that looking at the long term.
Reading the positions of various candidates, you know what we have in Corbett. Although he's made some gestures toward solving the problem, he hasn't done a thing. None of the Democrats have a real plan that is viable, in my opinion. So I continue my thoughts from the other night. There's 500 school districts in the state. I want to be in the last 250 to go broke. And I feel that once we get a couple hundred school districts that are broke, then some viable solution to the pension problem will be taken. We can't tax our way out of it. We can't save our way out of it. It's the perfect storm. With Act 1, we used to be able to be proactive so far as we knew we were going to spend $3 million or $1.5 million extra 2 years down the road. So we would raise it 0.75 mil per year so that when that time came, the money was there. We can't do that anymore. The pension used to be fairly reasonable. It isn't anymore. Insurance costs used to be predictable, if not under control, but they're not. So we've got a perfect storm of limited taxation ability or limited revenues, uncontrolled expenses that we cannot control, and it's in the state's hands. So I would like Exeter to be among the last 250 standing, and then we'll see what the state does with it. But it is in their court. We cannot do a thing with the problems. And I agree we should be prudent in our expenditures, but that is something that also has to work back to our minds. My thoughts.
And do you have any idea what is going on across the state in terms of the business managers and how they're viewing their budgets? I don't have a summary of what other districts in our county are doing in terms of tax increases, and I can get that information if you're interested in that. The conversations that we've had, really, they do revolve around the pension obligation. And the position is that it's mandated. We have to deal with it. And how do you deal with it? Well, if you have an exception, you need to take advantage of that. Because when you project out over 5 years, that cost becomes enormous, and that's really what's driving the increase of expenses are increasing at a much higher rate than revenue. So people are planning for it, but all school districts are different. Our challenges are different than, say, a Wilson. or other. But if you recall from the merger information that was provided in the financial report, you could see the similarity with Antietam and Exeter and what will look like in 15-16 through 17-18, and how the deficit will increase, which is why we will be using this nice fund balance that we have. Yes, it is, but it will be used if things continue as they are. And really, that's my job, is just try to have the funds available for the basic quality education till we get to the point where we're at 30% pension contribution rate. Will there be reform? I think it's going to be very difficult. We might get at a rate of 25% versus the 31% that's projected for 18-19. But you know what? Closing the doors is not an option. And the projections show us using this fund balance. The assignments, you can give me directions on ones you don't believe that should be in here. But I believe I have made a case for every one of these that are listed.
At our monthly superintendent's meetings, we go around the table at the very end, kind of like a round table type thing, and we talk about where we are with the budget, what's our deficit at, what is the board thinking in terms of tax increases and so forth. And and the last time we did that, and our meeting last month was canceled because not enough people were able to attend, but the meeting before that we had done that, and just about everybody had indicated a modest tax increase, and some felt they were in pretty decent shape, some didn't, but they were looking at a modest tax increase. And I would agree with Dr. Chimura about what he says about fund balance and so forth. It does seem very healthy, but for the projected future costs and the rate of increase for things like not just the pension, but certainly special education costs that are also increasing at 7-8% a year, healthcare, which is increasing at about that same rate, and we were very, very lucky this year, the 3%. I was absolutely thrilled. I thought I misread the email when Betty sent it last evening, because I couldn't believe that it was going to be that low. So, we got lucky, and I'm really happy about that, but we can't count on that. It's always trended at like 7% in that.
Well, the reason it's 3% is because the reserves that they have
Right.
are more than what they're allowed to have.
Right.
Which was a result of the board's action several years ago when the decision was made to self-insure.
Mm-hmm.
If we were still with Capital, Blue Cross Blue Shield, that it would be a different story. I was surprised it took as long as it did to reach that reserve that's required for the
I thought
fund.
it would take a few years.
And,
Well, we had quite a few months, though, of reaching that 3 months of reserve, a little bit over 3 months. So it was time to use some of those funds.
Right. Well, there was just no hint before yesterday that it could possibly even be that low.
Yeah,
So it was
good months.
It was a good surprise, but I wouldn't anticipate that every year. And again, when we don't believe our revenue is going to keep pace with those expenditures that we have no control over, then what are we going to do when we run on a fund balance to offset the deficit? And I'm not a finance person, but that's my question.
I believe I read this morning that Schuylkill Valley had used about $660,000 of their general fund. I mean, I don't know historically, what their practice is, or if that was in excess of 8%, they had that ability to use that money, or if they just decided that they were going to go out and try to, make the taxpayers happy for a year. I don't know what their strategy was.
They're probably doing the same thing we are. You plan on taking it out of reserve, and the budgets represent a maximum in the eyes of the administration. And all
Try not to
through
spend
the
that
year,
much.
all through the year, expenditures are considered in the hopes that if we obligate $1.2 million out of reserve toward balancing the budget, now we're only spending 400 out of last year's budget to cover that shortage that was budgeted but not used. So it allows the administration to show their skills at stretching the dollar to the maximum.
On that issue, in our budget last year, how much, do we have anything, do you think by June 30th that would be less than what the projected budget was, that there would be some savings?
Well, right now, deficit's about $450,000
From last year?
for this year.
For this year?
This year.
Oh, it's 400, we went over budget.
Well, we don't
No.
No.
That's
We're
how much
under
of our
budget.
reserve we would use.
No, I'm talking about the 13-14 budget that we did last year.
The deficit is lower than what we originally projected.
But that wasn't a passive thing, that was an active.
It was an active.
Oh, that was, yeah.
Active on the part of our passing it with money from the unobligated funds, an active part on the administration's part in minimizing what was spent out of the reserve. So that
And remember, there was no contract settled when the budget was adopted last June. So there were assumptions in the budget, and as the contracts were settled, things changed.
And that was an active participation on the part of our teachers.
And all of our employee groups.
That they were not hanging out there for, we have a union at the IU that's hanging out there for 5%. I mean, we have never had that type of
Right.
non-cooperation from our people.
With all due respect to all the comments, nothing changes the fact that there is excess balances out there to be used. There's excess cushion. It's sitting, earning absolutely nothing. I believe, I said this a number of months ago, and I'll say it again, it actually generated a letter or two to the editor in the Reading Eagle, with not my name attached, but I'll be happy to attach it in this particular case. I think not increasing taxes would be a sign that we're starting to move Exeter Township School District to be run as a business, as opposed to a socialist organization. I think any business that is in operation looks at its revenues and then tries to figure out what the level of expenditures can be based on those revenues. I think most of the people in households, most of the people in businesses. I watched this budget process. This wasn't my first time in a budget process, but it was my first time in a municipal budget process. We worked first from expenses and then worked up to see what the taxes needed to be. Now, I'm not going to, I'll bring in all the political economic philosophy books that define what it is and what it isn't. But we figure out how much we have to raise taxes, and I think that's the wrong way of doing it. And with the enrollment declining and the buildings built, I think it's time to put a cap on taxes and start on a downward track that follows enrollment.
Well, you made an interesting point when you said there's an excess cushion that's earning nothing. And that's probably the most honest statement. Because in the past, we earned a great deal. When you look at the 90s and back even the late 80s, we earned a lot from our investments. And it was a very nice bonus, and actually that's part of the reason that the pension plan got into its predicament. So it worries me that we would not only have we reduced our income because we're not, our money isn't earning anything, but that we would actually reduce our basis to have even less. We seem to have done relatively well over the last 40 years, in terms of about 30, I would say 30, in the manner in which this budget process has occurred. We've got a nice rating from Standard & Poor's. We have tried hard to make our education progressive, although we are not overly indulgent, I would say. I mean, there are schools in the area that are further ahead in various things than we are. So I can't find fault with the manner in which we've done the budget. And I cannot see, I cannot be so pessimistic to think that I can just give away or not give away, not protect the basic amount of money that I have for the programs that I think I'm going to do, and because the world is coming to an end. I'm sorry, but they're swinging on this pension idea again, and nobody has talked about pension actually. They just talked about how much money they're going to give the education, what the education amount of money is going to be, but they don't talk about the fact that the pension is out of control. So, I'm not here to, 10 years from now, I'll probably not be here, but aside from that, though, I just can't see not following in the same manner that we've done. We've managed to keep our school district financially healthy. We have a really nice rating now, and we should continue to work at that. And just, if the world falls apart, well, it's going to do it instantly, and that's going to be right. I disagree with the idea of not using all of our options for income this year. I don't think it's out of proportion to reality. So thank you.
Now, I'd just like to make a couple of comments. One is, I really believe this conversation is a mischaracterization of who we are. This is not a business. This is about quality education for kids. This is about at least continuing to maintain status quo as far as quality is concerned. I don't want to go backwards when it comes to quality. I believe this community does not want to go backwards as far as quality is concerned. We want our kids to have the best opportunity that they can possibly have. And we will continue to, at least I will continue, as I sit on this board, to support the kinds of programs that I believe better prepare kids for a future and make them better citizens and better able to take care of themselves and hopefully their future families. I've seen school districts, I've worked for a school district that took this approach. Spent their fund balance down to zero, went almost 15 years, actually one tax raise in 17 years. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, it's the city of Reading, and you see where they are financially. I don't want to go there. I believe that we need to continue to move this district forward in a manner in which is educationally sound. I think the kids need to be number one, and I think as we continue to talk about this as a business, I was 22 years in business, and I'll tell you what, we were only concerned about profit. This is not about profit, this is about quality, this is about service to the people of this community, and this is about our future. And we need to continue to support this in a responsible way.
Let me just follow on by saying that none of my recommendations for fund balances have targeted any one educational program. I don't think you heard that out of my mouth. We're not saying to cut any extracurricular. You didn't hear that out of my mouth. Those fund balances have grown an accumulation of what has been budgeted or needed over the years. Exeter was a growing district a number of years ago. Enrollments changed, the economics have changed, and the dynamic has changed. I hope to be optimistic and see this area grow, like I read in a letter recently by one of our neighboring superintendents who say that in the next economic boom, we may be finding that we're capacity short or something along those lines. I'm not, again, advocating anything that goes at the quality of the education. And as for the school rating, I think if you call Moody's, Standard & Poor's, Fitch, or anyone else and say that we are going to take and we are going to reduce one of the albatrosses that's listed, which is our high level of debt, I think they'd actually view that as positive.
That's not the impression I got in the GSBA articles on the budget. They addressed that.
Better than zero.
I guess everybody looks at things a little differently. When I look at our world, and it's just the way I look at things, when you're in a business, you can typically take defensive moves knowing where you're moving to and where you're coming from. In our case, we only get to move forward, we never get to relive our past or reinvent it. With the way school districts are built, we don't get to raise our costs drastically for things. We don't get to really shop around for our services. We are locked into a good service that is basically our teachers produce something for us. We can't cut our staff because frankly, when you cut your staff, then you cut your product that you're trying to generate, which is an education for your children. So therefore, you have to make moves that work for us. Yes, our population is down, but yet our costs are up. If we're looking at cost increase and we're looking at retirement increases basically to 10% now from where we used to be. We're looking at healthcare increases to 3%. We're really looking at special education increases of 8%. And that's 8% on student body is still going down. But now we're spending $12,827,547 for that. And another 1.3+ million for our charter schools. But yet we have no way to account for this. Yes, do we have some extra money sitting in our reserves? Yes, I do believe we have. Have we possibly put some money away for a rainy day that we don't know when it's going to happen? At one point we did. Unfortunately, now I see a bunch of storm clouds approaching. And I think we're trying to make sure that we can keep our reserves in place in order that we can move forward as well as we can while still maintaining the education. When we look at certain programs inside of our organization over the next several years, I think we will have to look at some evaluations of what stays and what goes. But before we come to that point, I think we have to keep looking at how do we keep the ship afloat? How do we make things productively move? And once again, we're not a business. In fact, we're more like a house. We're a household. If you know where you're going and you know where you've been, you have to know where you're going in the future. And where we know we're going in the future is we're going to 30+% for retirement. We're going to be increasing our insurance next year because we always do. Our special ed at this trend next year is going to be another 8% increase because last year was 7, this year's 8. And we're going to look at charter schools still keeping that population around 117 or 120, unless something happens on the state level. And when we look at 1.3 million and 12+ million, that's not money that comes from the state. That's money that comes from Exeter Township. That's money that comes from yourselves and myself. It doesn't come from anywhere else. We pay that bill. Almost 14 million, right out of our pockets, out of a $65+ million budget. We're looking 25% of our money goes out the door before we even start paying our teachers on other stuff and other things. So that's where I'm at. I can't see us not doing something because we have to make some steps to maintain the status quo. At the same case, I want to say you increase your taxes by 4%, but I think a modest increase of 1% is not really realistic. I think that that's just trying to keep yourself afloat at the current time.
All right, what we're doing tonight is putting a preliminary in, and we'll be working on refining the budget when we have our chance, when we actually vote on a budget next month. So I would suggested we move on for the time being. Mr. Staub, if you'd handle business.
I move that the Board of School Directors approve the proposed final general fund budget for the 2014-2015 school year as per the attached resolution. That's in attachment 1A.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion?
Bob, just to be clear, we're voting on a budget that has a $1.7 million deficit.
All in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Ayes carried. Motion passes.
I move that the Board of School Directors approve the following textbooks and authorize district administration to process purchase commitments related to the implementation of the new math curriculum after the 30-day public viewing has ended on May 15, 2014, numbers 1, 2, and 3.
Second.
Motion is second. Discussion.
Dr. Warren, can I just ask a question about, this is the math curriculum. Could you talk a little bit about the necessity for the math coordinator and how that impacts the adoption of the program and the retention?
Yes, there's a lot of, there's a lot of data out there that indicates that having a person dedicated to that subject and to the implementation of the new program is going to result in a higher rate of implementation and a lot more ease for the teachers in being able to implement a new program. Having someone in sort of a coaching position that is actually out in the field and working side by side with teachers, demonstrating how to use certain techniques, certain strategies in the math classrooms, and watching the teachers be able to implement those strategies and providing some feedback on how they can improve the strategies and helping them gain confidence in their use of the new program results in up to a 95% successful implementation rate, whereas not having that, the figures are much, much lower. Dr. Davies, do you have anything else to add to that? Since you've been working so closely in this program.
Only in that Exeter has been using the professional development money over the past several years on coaching in the language arts area. We have not invested that type of money in our math program. This year we have gone K-12 literally with math curriculum adoption. We are implementing a new math program in K-5, another one in 6th through Algebra 1, and we have a STEM program that is projected over 4 years that's going to, it's already seeing great returns in terms of student interest, and there's a lot of moving pieces there. And to be able to work with our teachers to implement this at high levels, that's how we're going to make big change here. And this this program director, this coordinator is going to be, it's very needed in order to keep all these pieces together. So.
And to Dr. Davies' point, most of you know Mrs. Klein, our reading coordinator, and the success that our literacy program has had over the past several years under her leadership. This is the same thing we're looking to do to help our math program achieve the same levels of success as our literacy program has recently enjoyed. And we want to give it the same level of attention that it deserves, similar to our literacy program.
So is there a metric that you would peg this program to that would say, yes, it's being successful?
A metric, yes. We have some things that we would specifically look for in the classroom to show that the math practices and the curriculum are being implemented as they are intended to be. And we would use that to assess how well the teachers are doing with it, you know, who needs more guidance, who may be struggling, because it's hard to implement something that's completely new and completely different from the manner in which they had been used to teaching before. So I really feel that this is a great need, and as has been shown through the literacy program, it has achieved success when we have used this methodology to assist our teachers in such an implementation.
I have a question about the Algebra Connection, because that program is 8 years old, and yet we need to match our curriculum to the Common Core standards.
That's a very good point. The College Prep Math does have a Common Core Algebra 1 book that does not align as closely as their older textbook to the Keystone exam. The Keystone was actually written and put out prior to the Common Core adoption, and the other districts that use college preparatory mathematics in Pennsylvania have found greater success using the older textbook, which uses the same math practices, because now we're aligning our curriculum not only to the new content standards of the core, but those 8 mathematical practices. So the college preparatory mathematics prior edition of Algebra 1 does a great job of aligning the curriculum to the 8 practices as well as to the Keystone exam. So we were in a place where, what do we align it to? There's so many different standards out there, and we thought that since the students needed to graduate, we need to go to Keystone.
Thanks.
I'd like to ask this a question. Why in C we are getting a book that is dated 206 when there wasn't even such thing as a Common Core at that time?
Is that the same question?
That's the question.
Pardon?
That's what Dr. Bender just
Oh,
asked.
is that what you asked?
Yes,
And
but
what-
do you want further clarification?
Yeah, why would you use 206? I mean, it says that this was dated 206. That's
right.
8 years ago.
The Keystone exam is not reflecting the core standards in math. There's a disconnect between the Keystone and our standards. It's something that it's statewide. It's where we're all dealing with it. So as we're looking for a textbook, a resource that is going to support our students, we decided to find that resource that aligns more closely with that Keystone exam, because those students will need that exam, proficiency in the exam, in order to graduate. So that's that was the rationale. We talked to other districts in the state that are using college preparatory mathematics, and they found great success with that, because CPM does a great job aligning to the 8 math practices. That was the rationale there. They do have a new core edition, and when they change the Keystone exam, it will be something that we'll have to look at.
Well, could we buy it in paperback or something rather than hard?
Actually, all these are paperback.
And these are, they are.
And we're also getting the e-books that it just comes with it. It's not it's just an add-on. But they are something that the kids can use at home, and they can be updated as well.
Do we have a cost factor with these books? I mean, do we know what the costs are on these?
Yes.
Yeah, we do.
Do we have that available for next week?
Well, the books for the I broke it out here by building. It's the supplies and the books kind of go together. So we're looking at $27,000 approximately for the 9th grade algebra program. Now, some of the students in the junior high are also taking algebra. Their cost there, because it's actually every student will be using the CPM program. It's about $65,000, and Franklin $33,000, Jackson Wald closer to $25,000, and Watson Creek about $45,000, and Lorraine is going to be close to about $32,000.
Are you asking for the total cost?
I was thinking, what's going to be the total cost, and then what would be the replacement cost when, say, these get aligned with Keystone, or if we're going to find a textbook?
Just for the algebra or for the whole program?
Algebra, for the algebra, yeah.
Okay. Well, the algebra, as I mentioned, it's about, and I didn't break it out by the book, I had to break it out by the building so we could code these correctly. So it's probably about $30,000 for that. So It's going to be it's going to be a while. We're not anticipating, haven't heard anything at all about the Keystone being rewritten in the next 2 or 3 years.
It just came out really last
So
year.
I don't see that being something that we're going to be looking at.
Any further comments?
I have some question, but not, it's related but not direct. If we have a student that's moving ahead in mathematics, are they able to move through these books or programs quicker? So it's not just an 8th, 9th algebra, they can move into it in 7th if we have
Yes.
a grouping of students?
That's a great question, and as we are, we currently offer an honors level pre-algebra course, so some of the junior high courses will change to accelerated courses, and it's going to be a true accelerated course rather than just a different branding of the same course, where we have a 6th grade program, a 7th grade program, an 8th grade program, and an Algebra 1 program. And we will be able to successfully accelerate our students beginning in 6th grade through about 1.5 years of a program. The next year in 7th grade, they'll be doing another 1.5 years, and they'll be able to jump into the Algebra 1 in 8th grade. And again, we've been talking to a lot of other districts who are using this program, and they have a great sequence that allows us to get through all the content, so we're not skipping any content. But since those students are better mathematically, they can accelerate through the content at a more quick rate.
So they're doing 3 years of math in 2 years.
3 and 2. And there's also another pathway that we're going to talk about next year, that if, based on an assessment result, they can do, they can accelerate even in 7th grade to get into that, so that we're not pigeonholing anybody in 6th grade. And, we're still allowing some opportunities for students to maybe move into the district or
I mean, my love and emphasis has always been that in mathematics, a student moves at their rate. It's not just, and it sounds like we're going that way, which is good, because I think there are certain students that you find usually that some reason their minds just connect in a way that we can hold them back because we say, well, that's what the program is. So the main thing is to have that program.
Are we ready to move on to issue?
Thank you.
What we're considering now is purchasing of the books for the new math program after the 30-day public review period. All in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
That concludes business talk.
Personnel.
I move that Heidi A. Lachlan be appointed as K-12 Coordinator of Math and STEM at an annual salary of $82,000 with a start date of July 1st, 2014.
Second.
Motion, second discussion.
Just want to again comment that this is not a new position for folks out there. This is a position that we had, and it was 3 years ago, 4? I can't remember.
I think it's 4, it'll be
4 years. So this is, again, this is a position that we have been without now for some time, that we are putting back in place with the new curriculum.
And we're actually asking more of this person because the former math coordinator was K-6 elementary. And this math coordinator will be K-12 and will include the science, technology, engineering, and math program as well as mathematics.
I am so excited to see this on the list. It is
Any further
amazing.
comments, questions? Hearing none. All in favor of hiring Ms. Rockman, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries. That concludes the business portion, or the voting meeting portion. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn
So moved.
this portion. I have a motion, second? The voting meeting is adjourned. Now, I call together the workshop meeting. We will have the 2 sets of minutes to be voted upon. Does anyone know of any corrections in those? We'll have the 4th reading of the new policy concerning posting materials and non-school organizations. Have we ironed out the difficulties on those?
Yes, we met with John Malsney, Mrs. Kutcher joined us and had some suggestions, and John made sure we incorporated her suggestions and also kept in the law, the law, legal guidelines that we had to for this policy.
Mr. Stowe, business functions.
Full lineup. First thing we'll be voting on is appointing Mrs. Patricia O'Brien Piaja as treasurer for school district next year. Under letter B, we will be voting on appointing Attorney Malsney, the solicitor for the school district, retainer fee of $4,800. Excuse me here, $4,800, and an hourly rate of $140, which is a $5 an hour increase, the first increase since 2008, and that will be for the 2014-2015 school term.
And do you have any idea how much we paid? I know we had the $4,800 retainer fees, but how much compensation did Mr. Morrison get, say, between July 1 of 2013 and as of this date? Approximately.
I have provided that in the past. I don't have that with me, and I don't really want to guess off the top of my head.
Okay, maybe
You know, it
next
could
week.
range around 50,000 to approximately 50,000. 60,000.
Anything Ann gives me, I keep close to my heart.
Thank you. And this information is fiscal 2012-13, which would be last year, obviously. Almost 80,000. And in 11-12, 53,000. In 10-11, 60,000. So it depends upon what's going on in the district.
It was probably higher last year because of his work with food service, collective bargaining, I'm assuming maybe this
He
year.
was in court twice on the,
No, that's right, the
Wall
water
Street.
reassessments.
We had the reassessments going on.
That's true.
Winter.
Yes, sir.
Hold me up, because I know we've had some discussions about this, but I guess my question, if it can be boiled down, is when is the last time that we've put out the board solicitor for competitive bid? And is that an obligation that we have as a board?
I've been here 13 years, and we have not put out the bid on that side. It is a professional service, and we have no obligation to do so. I will volunteer to get you some rates from the other school districts for your information before we vote on this next time. And then if you find that we're out of line and that we should be bidding it out, going out with a request for bids, we can do that.
I'll only ask you to do that if you think that is a worthwhile thing to do at this point.
Well, if it answers the question in your mind, it's worthwhile.
I think you're gonna find as well.
I talked to Boyertown, and the attorney down there about fell out of his chair when I told him that John was charging us. But I will get official information for you.
Under letter C, we'll be voting on approving a change to the agreement between owner and architect dated June 20, 2006 to include the completion of the site work at Watton Creek. The services will be invoiced in accordance with the hourly rate schedule, and the hourly rates are unchanged since 2006.
I had a question about that. What would change from, why would we need an architect at this time in terms of, if we went back to the original specifications?
Well, they were the ones that are originally responsible for all of that. So they are assisting in the coordination of awarding of the bids, ensuring that the work is being done.
And
according to
our legal
specifications.
representatives recommended it, as I recall, during a phone call, their conference call.
They're the ones that came up with the specifications, so they need to continue on in that capacity and ensuring, and going through this whole process of litigating or getting the job done.
Is this still involving the soil conservation? A lot of it.
Right, we have not satisfied
Okay,
the
that's-
requirements.
I just wanted to make sure that that's the only place.
Okay, thank you.
Under letter D, we'll be voting on accepting the audit of the St. Lawrence Real Estate Tax Collector for year ending December 31st, 2013. And attachment 6D. Audit was, if you read it, the audit was good. Again, they just had the segregation of duties, which is difficult when there's only one person there. So that's, we have that every time. Under letter E, we'll be voting on the proposed final budget for the food service department for the 2014-15 school year. It will be a net loss of $133,242. It will, though, include $105,000 and change to the general fund for utilities, insurance, and other district-provided services. The balance of the food service will still be over $800,000, but similar to the when we talked about the funds, it was 1.2 million, but with the cost of food and things like that, it has that fund balance has gone down, but it's still pretty healthy.
Does that include the lunch increases for next year?
Yep. The under letter F will be voting on approving the proposed final budget for the capital project funds, excluding the Awatin Creek Project Fund for the 2014-2015 year, with revenue of $20,250, expenditures of $130,000, and a fund balance of $6,172,216. We'll be voting on approving a one-year renewal of a planned service agreement with Johnson Controls for the York Chiller at the junior high school for $6,234 for the 6/1/2014 to 5/31/2015, which is a 3% increase over the current year. Also approving a one-year renewal of planned service agreement with Johnson's Control for HVAC at the senior high, junior high, Reichman, Lorraine, Loush at a cost of $46,719 for a period of 7/1/2014 to 6/30/2015, which is a 3% increase. And just so I'm sure, that's not a typo with those dates, that the one is just a month old. The contract.
June, no, it's just
Is
timing.
the time, okay. Just making sure we're right there in time. We'll be voting on approving a one-year renewal with Lutron Services for the maintenance contract for the Awatin Creek Lutron lighting control system, $5,828 for the period of 6/7/2014 through 6/6/2015, which is a 1.2% increase. Under letter J, we'll be authorizing district administration to advertise for sealed bids for the sale of one Hobart potato peeler purchased in 1981 at a cost of $3,244 by the Food Service Fund. And I personally am a little disappointed that it only lasted this many years.
I thought they were built for.
Just a change of, Joe, it's a change of potatoes.
Can we offer it to the Smithsonian?
Yeah, we should have bought it.
25 years old or more should be a collector's item, right?
You get antique lights?
Yeah.
We'll be voting on approving the disposal of 207 French and German textbooks dated 1998. The books no longer have value.
What do we have to vote on that?
You
Does it
just-
fall with taxpayers?
Yes.
An asset.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Can you give them, when you say dispose of, do they give them away to somebody, or we?
Oh,
They take
I don't
them.
think we.
Nobody will take 'em.
We beg people to take them.
We're trying
My
to get rid
schools
of
all
the
get
old
state money
math
for
books.
textbooks now.
It's
You don't, I
hard
don't
to
need
find
free.
anybody to take them.
Right.
They do. They won't.
It might
We're
literally
asking
be
anybody to
dispose
get
of
something.
them. Get someone to cart them away and do whatever with them.
Would some of the students want them?
I'm sure they've checked. I'm sure they've
You
checked.
can give them away as prizes.
No, we don't have to go that far.
Or as punishment.
If you get through your fifth year in German.
I've still got a Beowulf.
Yeah, this time or the other.
Original.
Yeah.
What he signed. Somebody said, was it signed by the author?
That's what I just said.
Before Quinter's ancestors came here, their name was Beowulf.
Moving on, the letter L will be voting on authorizing district participation in the Berks County Joint Purchasing Board for the following bids, items 1 through 12. Letter M, voting on approving budget transfers for the month of April 2014 in the amount of $49,016. That's in attachment 6M. You'll notice a larger transfer. It was 30 or 35,000. I don't have it right in front of me. It was for a piece of equipment that is replacing an employee. It's basically like a gang mower or something of that sort that we cut the staff. There was one person cut down, and the payback time is 1.7 years on that piece of equipment.
Where was this? I didn't.
We cut someone down.
You cut someone
We did not
down?
cut one
We
down.
cut them down.
There is one less staff person, so the equipment, Ken was, went to Wilson, saw this piece of equipment. It's allowing us to be more efficient with this new piece of equipment.
Where's that on here?
It's on the budget transfers, just telling you that,
Oh, well, there.
yeah. So it's a little unusual to have that large, and I'm just bringing that to your attention. That's real good. Under letter N, we'll be authorizing administration to execute an athletic trainer services agreement with Commonwealth Orthopedic for a 3-year term, July 1st, 2014 through June 20th, 2017, for an annual fee of $20,100 each year. And just one other thing, when we talk about the budget, just from a dollar perspective, I just want to go with just the pension from 2011 and 12 to 2018-19. Our contribution was $1,250,000 in 11-12. In 2018-2019, our contribution will be $5,001,932. So you're talking about $3.75 million just with that line item by the time we get to 2018-19. And then that number is in place for the next, I believe, 25 years. So we talk about fiscal doom. That's the largest piece of the component. But again, as I said, it's just running numbers. You cannot tax your way out of paying that thing. It's just impossible.
Yeah,
So,
is that the total amount, or do we get reimbursed?
no, that's ours. That's ours.
That's ours.
That's our piece. So the total is actually right around 10.
Yeah.
25 years.
Any questions for Mr. Stowe?
And I'll if you all-
Dr. Bender, personnel.
We'll begin with Part A, resignations. We have one certificated staff and two support staff resigning. Part B, we have appointments and certificated staff, substitute teachers and support staff. Part C, leaves of absence for certificated and support staff. Part D is fairly large because that's our summer school staffing. Part E, there are extended contracts for employees who work additional days beyond the regular school year. HARDAP, Special Education Extended School Year Program for those students who need an ESY. And Part G are staff conferences.
Can I ask a
Yes,
question
Mike.
about the resignations under Part A? They're all special ed related positions. Is there something going on in that area that people are leaving?
No, one is a teacher, she's taking a job in another district. Not sure about the two support.
Yeah, Heidi's, that's a femme, she's taking care of her mother-in-law. And Maggie is, I think she's been with us 10 years and she's going. It's coincidence that it's special ed. I think Carrie wants to teach elementary special ed. She was hired at Boyertown.
That completes personnel.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry. This is a quick question. It was related to number 1 and 3, and I know Steve, I'm a freak guy, but how's he doing both jobs?
Wait, 1 and 3.
On under D? Was it one's a half day and another's a half day?
One and 3.
He's working June 30th to August 1st, and he's working June 30th to August 3rd at option 1 and option 3.
So
Oh, under the summer school.
Summer school enrichment and then the teacher in the
Are
park.
they different times of the day?
Yeah, different.
Not every day.
In different days.
Yeah.
One's not every
Okay.
day. And
Well, I asked.
yeah, he's not really
double
going to be in two
dipping.
places at one time.
Hey, any way you can make them really
Yeah.
Hey,
Any further questions on personnel? Moving on to student functions.
Item A, just the benefits and 16-hour radius. And B, we'll be moving these forward. And could we find out what days of the week these are? So that Bender doesn't have to ask us.
1.5 school days are being missed by each group.
Does that satisfactory?
No.
that's one.
Is that enough information to make a
But
decision?
that's
Oh,
what
that's
it
enough
is.
information, yes.
Okay,
Thank you, I'm sorry.
He's still not happy.
Are they self-funded events?
Yes, they are. Can I just make a point, Carol, very
Yeah.
quickly under the trips within the 60-mile radius? The first trip that's listed did not actually take place, the Special Olympics. It was rained out. Unfortunately, they did not have a rain day selected, so that event will actually be held here in Exeter on June 3rd, Special Olympics. So they won't have to go on a trip to get there, at least our kids won't.
See?
You're on C.
All right, yeah, I see. So I'm just thinking about this chemistry kids one day. Anyhow, we'll be moving the agreement between pediatric therapeutic services and Exeter Township School District for the next year, it's $7.50 an hour. Item D, moving the contract with Pathway School for 2014 Extended School Year Program Services from July 14th through August 15th for a specific student.
Do you have a microphone over there?
Yes, but she doesn't use it.
I know, I didn't want to say that.
Was she so loud?
I have to turn it off because she's so loud.
Item E, moving that the adoption of the settlement agreement and release to provide 5 hours of homebound instruction for a student. And item F, recommending that the board approve the renewal of the contract with Manitou to provide alternative ed for disruptive youth.
Excuse me.
Is that it? That's a slight increase in cost, I see.
Yes.
That's what I was gonna ask. Are we gonna increase our lease to them?
Oh, we haven't dealt with the lease yet, have we?
No, I have to look at that.
And how many students do you typically have at Manitou?
Besides the 2 prepaid slots, it'll range between 5 and 6. as,
Can we have more than 2 slots since it's a lot cheaper if we have the slots?
typically, the decision on slots is based upon those that will absolutely be returning. But
You say
when I say a high of, 5 or 6, some of them are, go back to whichever of our school buildings, once they meet the expectations. But there's consistently not 5 all the time or 6, it could be less.
But
But
it's
at
a lot
least 2.
cheaper, it's a lot more cost effective if we had more than 2 slots, right? If we're having 6 students, do we have 6 students almost throughout the whole year?
No, that's the problem. We don't, and Dr. Miller tries to predict and doesn't want to over-predict. And we've been in that situation where we purchase too many slots and then they're sitting there unfilled and we're still paying for them. So, we sort of leave it up to her to try to guess her best estimate of what she thinks will be there. And we're finding more and more needs to place students in other specific situations due to their specific needs and so forth. As you've seen from the many different agreements that we end up having to have approved. So we don't want to I'll talk to Sue, she's away until Friday, but I'll talk to Dr. Miller again and ask her if she thinks maybe we might want another slot or 2. I'm sure there's still time that we could approve another slot or 2 if we needed to.
You'll have to excuse me, I have an emergency at home.
I'm going to pick up on it. It will be recommended to the board that they approve an agreement between the Devereaux Foundation and the Exeter Township School District to provide a summer ESY education program for student number 170278 for the period July 7th through August 22nd at a cost of $210 a day. And it will be recommended to the board that they approve tuition agreements between New Story and the district to provide extended school year services for a number of students. That concludes student functions.
Any comments, questions on student functions? Curriculum and programs, Mr. Duser.
We'll be giving authorization to the appropriate district personnel to submit paperwork to get the money. Title I, Title II, Title III, Alternative Education, and the Accountability Block Grant, and/or the Ready to Learn grant.
Whatever survives.
Yeah, but you can't win. Well, the name
Comments, questions? Are there any other issues to be brought before the board?
I would just like to know if I could just get an update as to where we are related to our vote on Antietam and shared services. I'm a little concerned, not having heard anything, that there might not be as much interest on the Antietam side, and I'd like to just get an update because I want to make sure that the resources that we're directing to have the discussions and negotiations are being reciprocated on the other end.
I contacted Dr. Mays, and he actually seemed very receptive to having some discussions about some things we could possibly do. We briefly talked about a combined cyber school type of thing, which I think would take some work on both our parts. And I'm also thinking about pitching an idea to him. I did some research into some courses that we offer at the high school level, particularly those that might be offered either at the beginning of the day or end of the day that might be of interest, that are not offered in Antietam and might be of interest to some Antietam students. We'd have to work out a lot of details, but I thought with particularly the upper classroom, the upperclassmen who may be able to drive or may have their own transportation, it might be amenable to Antietam to include those students in one or more of our classes, either at the beginning or the end of the day, to either release them early or have them attend their other classes at Antietam later in order to take advantage of some courses that we're able to offer because of our larger size. So, you know, I will follow up and talk to Dr. Mace about that and see if there's any interest in that. And if not, see if we could look at a larger project that may require a couple of years' work to get it off the ground, but may be beneficial to both districts.
Is there a funding, has there been any discussion about how we would arrive at sort of funding something
No,
like that?
that's something that we would need to work out, and I'm assuming that could be the first question. You know, I'm sure there's logistics with the transportation issue. That's why I was looking at courses either at the front part or the end part of the school day. But aside from that, there, we would have to work out a cost factor, and not really sure how that would look, and I'm sure that would be one of their first questions. So, something I may have to come back to the board with, assuming there's any interest at all in that. But my first thought was, let me identify what might be available and see if there's any interest in pursuing that.
Dr. Martin, I think that where you're going is something where I've actually thought about it past when we met last time and we went through the whole voting, everything. Right now, what is Antietam's schedule? Do they align with our high school as far as?
No, they don't. Now, the good thing is, and I see Bill Kane in the background too, he can probably say more than I can, but they do share the same software, scheduling software that we have. So that's the good part about it. It makes it a lot easier. But their schedules don't align to ours at all. They have, I think they're implementing this year, if I remember correctly, a 7-period day where the classes are a little bit longer than the typical 45 minutes, or what is it, like maybe a 48-minute class or something, if I recall what Mary told me. And I believe this is their first year, and that's totally different from ours. It's totally different. However, I'm thinking that there has to be some flexibility in the schedule so that, they could butt up against a study hall or something, so, if the students are arriving late, I'm oversimplifying, and I'm sure.
I mean, one of the things that I think of, I just think logistically, if there's a way that Antietam could bring their schedule to a start point where ours is.
Yeah.
I know one of the things that was mentioned to me by one or two of the members of Antietam's board was the fact that they are afraid of losing students for their activities, because obviously they have a smaller body, and if these students aren't available in the afternoon to participate in clubs or sports, etc., that's going to deteriorate from their program. And there was a way that we can make and the first thing that comes to mind for me all the time is AP courses, because we just have sheer numbers that allows us to provide more, was that if we could provide those unique AP courses in the morning, where a student could come participate in 2 courses in a block schedule type of format, and then leave at lunchtime. As far as transportation, I tend to think more of a shuttle bus might be a better thing for a safety situation, where we don't have to have any feelings of guilt or liability if a student's on the road. They don't have to feel rushed one way or another.
Right.
Coordination is also better as far as parking and all the.
I'm just thinking of ways to keep costs down to a minimum, but yeah, and I did identify, some courses that are offered first thing in the morning, for example, that we offer that they don't have. For example, some of our AP courses. Now, not all of them are offered during that time, but there are some that they don't have. So that could be just a starting point for some common ground to work toward. I don't know what their starting time and ending time of their day is, but I can't imagine it would be vastly different from ours.
That would be a good. Oh, then they're
pretty close. They're pretty close. So.
The other thing that came to mind was if there's any other kind of office services that we could share, which would help both districts, where we could, right now we have an office, we have a business manager, they have a business manager. Maybe there's a way of having one business manager, 2 assistant business managers to keep costs separate. I know that at some point their superintendent's retiring. We hire an assistant superintendent there, we have our assistant superintendent, we manage staff separately that way as far as your academic operations. I just started thinking about how we can leverage that type of office where we don't change up the unique personalities of school districts, but at the same time, as we looked earlier, we're looking at ways to reduce costs while
Right.
maintaining services.
Well, since their primary objective was to give more opportunities for their students, I started by looking at the academic side of things, but I'm sure there may be other things also. But
Any
it's
other
something I
issues?
have to pursue more, and I have to know about, what kind of costs are we looking at.
Russ.
And my primary concern is that, it takes 2 to tango.
Right.
So that, I would be concerned about us pursuing or trying to make something work where the other party just might not have a level of interest, and that's why I think the board needs to be updated on a fairly regular basis, because
Right.
one, if we move forward, we're gonna need to be involved, but two, there's not an interest on the other end. I'd rather see our attention focused here.
Exactly, because we have plenty of things to keep us busy. So, so my initial contact was positive, but I have to come in with a couple of ideas and listen to their ideas as well, and I'll keep everyone posted.
Dr. Martin,
Yes.
we also, maybe some of our students, I do think that
Yeah.
Antietam would have things to offer us that maybe we don't offer our students, and could we maybe explore that too?
Yeah, there are a couple of courses, Pat. To be honest, I don't think there are many that aren't replicated here, just because of our sheer size. But there are a few, maybe 3, 4 courses that certainly we might have an interest here.
And
have to look at that as well.
with their smaller community, I think maybe some of our students who maybe, choose, sometimes students in the high school, that they like a smaller setting, and I think that's one of the reasons why some of them might go to silent school, because they kind of get lost in the high school setting. Because I noticed that Antietam has very few students going to charter schools.
Pat, I looked at those numbers and I discussed them with Dr. Mays. They have roughly about a quarter of the students we have, and they're about a quarter of our size. So proportionately, they have about the same amount of kids.
Oh, I thought it was much more. I thought they had about 20.
More like,
Yeah, just an FYI for the board, a week ago, yesterday, Monday and Tuesday were PSBA Advocacy Days in Harrisburg. We started meeting with some legislators at the PSBA Center in Mechanicsburg, and then we moved on to the state capitol. I just wanted to let you know that I had done that, and that I would strongly recommend, if any of you have an opportunity to attend one of those, and all of you do. That's the first one they've had in, I think, 4 years. There haven't been any since the previous director, Tim Allwine, had passed away. So this is bringing back a program. It was extremely well done. It was extremely well organized, and some of the words from the legislators were encouraging, but it is an election year. And I just wanted to share the 3 issues that we were talking about. The legislators were pension reform, special education funding, and some sort of the establishment of a predictable funding formula. But I wanted to share this one thing with you. Almost every state pays a larger percentage of overall public education costs than Pennsylvania does. On average, other states contribute 44% of total education funding, but Pennsylvania contributes only 34.5%. This low state share means that our local school districts must pay 53.5% of all public education costs. In fact, Pennsylvania ranks 47th among the states in the amount of state subsidies allocated to support elementary and secondary education. I think that also helps us. It makes it easier to understand why millage rates are as high as they are within the state, and why public school districts are having the kinds of financial challenges that they're having. That's all I have.
Mrs. Cook,
Yes.
are you awake?
debate. Okay. Well, how do you follow up that? You know what I mean? I'm just going to review for you. Well, I have reviewed for you the goals from the beginning of the year and the progress that we've made in those areas. I'd like to draw your attention to the school partnerships, number 3 on my report. I wanted to inform you of our Green Team, which we started this year at Watton. We've talked about it since we've been there, and now we've had some parents organize a group to better coordinate the recycling and green practices within the building. And that was coordinated by Betsy Holliday, who is also a good supporter of the Exeter Education Foundation, just by the way. We had our Family Fun Earth Day event in April, and at that time, we, Danny Japina, worked with the Green Team to publish a book, which she shared. Thank you for bringing it. And we had different tables set up in the cafeteria where kids could use recycled things to create things. We had somebody from there from the gardener, the master gardener, and the kids could plant seeds that bees would actually pollinate. Bees and pollinate. So, and Patricia can attest to that information. I didn't get all that information, but Mr. Dreibler, Wonder Man, who is in 2 places at once over the summer, did a special project with Mr. Pitts and his class, and he created a report, the kids did, about the energy efficiency of our building. So I will have that out for the art show, which is tomorrow evening. So you're welcome to look at that. Actually, Mrs. Kutcher asked for an update about the Mascaro grant that Carol Moyer had received. We have our windmill aerator. It's probably somewhere in this building, like in the garage. Home Depot will build a base for the windmill aerator, and then it will be installed into the pond to...
And the foundation is buying the windmill books.
Hmm?
I said, and the foundation is buying the windmill books.
Yes, the Harnessing Wind Energy book. So she will do that over the summer as well and get all that stuff together. So we're building on the green theme at Watton. We do have the district battle of the books at Watton on Thursday. You're certainly welcome to attend. This year we have all 3 of the elementary K-4 buildings participating. Mrs. Heller, and I think it's at 10 o'clock, but I'm not absolutely sure on the time, so I could email that to Dr. Martin if anybody's interested in coming. And we're doing Alex's Lemonade Stand, supervised by Jess Marburger again this year. And that's in honor of our former student, Jacob Maurer, who is now at Rifton. Dana Wertz was selected by the Global Autism Awareness Association to participate in a field trip to India. And all of the staff across the district helped us raise $23.75 to help her with her trip. She needed $5,000 by May.
I don't think Bender will approve that.
What?
I said, I don't think Dr. Bender would approve that. I think it's out of the 60-mile radius.
It's during the summer. She can do what she wants on her own time. But I did want to thank all the administrators and teachers for helping with that opportunity for Dana, and we were very happy for her and being able to go. And
What was she doing in India?
she'll raise awareness about autism and talk about resources that are available for folks so that they have a better understanding about autism and what's available. That's basically it. So, yeah. And I have a little bit there about the math practices and the investigations that we talked about at our April staff meeting. So at the elementary level, each of us has put together a bulletin board featuring pictures and comments about for our art shows, and we've also started designing a pamphlet for parents that describes the new program. I also wanted to mention that Tom Legath took over, I think he was volunteered, how did you say that, Joe?
He was voluntold.
Voluntold. To coordinate the Special Olympics for Berks County because it's held at Kutztown annually, and our kids are very excited to go to that in the multiple disabilities class and the life skills class. However, it rained, so it was canceled, and Tom Legath took up the charge and is now going to sponsor that at the high school on June 3rd. And I understand the seniors don't have class that day, so they're helping. Yes.
Wait.
You're helping.
Oh, they were voluntold. So that's about it. Any questions?
Is the Special Olympics for all the children that would have participated in Kutztown or just for the extras?
All the students.
All
Really?
students from the county.
Not everybody's participating, but most are.
Excuse me?
Not every district is participating, but most are.
Yeah, I mean, I just didn't know, we mentioned it quickly, but I just wanted,
Yeah.
because that was really cool.
Yeah.
What is Alice training?
Don?
That is one of the approaches to, it's a life skill, it's considered a life skill, so how everybody can protect themselves in the event of an active shooter.
Do you remember what it stands for?
Each letter does stand for something, I can't remember. All our teachers are going to be getting that training on June 9th.
Alert, lockdown,
How to react to the
evacuate.
active shooter.
It's to be proactive in an active shooter situation.
Thanks.
Yeah, one other thing, thank you.
Thank you.
We discussed a little bit at the business functions meeting the other evening, an independent financial counselor service. Do you have something prepared to say on that, Dan?
I do.
Only 2 or 3 slides.
I'm sorry to torture everyone. Torture myself. We've had discussions about our bond sales methods, the role of the underwriter not being our fiduciary, and also, the changes that came about with the Dodd-Frank Act and the disclosures that the underwriters, they have. Oh, okay. So what I've done was try to gather some information and talk about the services of an independent financial advisor. I spoke with someone from Public Finance, PFM. Basically, a financial advisor is looking out for the issuer, the school district, issues bonds, our best interests. They, of course, would help select the type of financing, provide ideas, and the method